Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. We are a year-round talk series bringing you the best creative voices across film, television, and theater. And today we are joined by the fantastic Peter Facinelli. And one of the things I was really curious about in terms of your work and your relationship with your creative storytelling over the last few months since we've been through this pandemic is, I remember several years ago when you were working on Twilight and Nurse Jackie that you were flying back and forth a lot, and then you very proactively took some time to really be at home and only take projects that were in LA. And you talked at the time about how that did create some limitations and restrictions on the types of things that you were working on. And it made you think very differently about creativity and your relationship to it. And so I was curious how that really fed into the continued shift that we've all been forced into over this last year with the pandemic, particularly when the industry shut down and you had to kind of retool the way that you were thinking about your career in that moment.
Yeah. Well, I wish I could say, in some ways I utilized the time well, but I wish I could say I utilized it more because, when you have all this time before the pandemic, you're always like, oh, if I had time for this and I had time for that. Now, all of a sudden we were forced with the hamster wheel broke and we were left with all this time. And so in my mind, I was like, oh, this is great. I'll pick up my guitar more and I'll take my Italian lessons and Spanish lessons. I've always wanted to learn, because I took Spanish in high school and I'll write some scripts. And then all of a sudden, like a year goes by and you're like, what did I do? So I think honestly for me, the year was more about being reflective and going inside because I ended up doing a lot more meditation and a lot more focus on me personally, my health. Like I lost 30 pounds and eating better. Because before I was always on the go and getting on airplanes and unconsciously eating. So I wasn't like overweight before, but I just wasn't eating healthy. So I was doing more, fast food stuff. And I mean, when I shot The Vanished, literally, I was eating like M&Ms every day. Like that was my go-to just to like get me through the day. Cause you don't have time to sit down and have meals and stuff. So basically I learned to just focus more on myself, focus more on my health and just go inside and I even learned hypnosis because I was so fascinated with the mind, and how the mind works. So I took a course in hypnosis and I got certified in hypnosis. So I could literally hypnotize people for money, but I won't. But creatively, like I mean, the one good thing out of last year, COVID, I was able to get the Unbreakable Boy, a film that I optioned this book on, and I had the time to help steer that and make that grow into teaming up with Kingdom and teaming up with Lionsgate and getting that film made in the middle of a pandemic was quite a feat. I mean, I forget sometimes that I've done stuff. So like, because there's all these 10,000 things I want to do and you end up doing like 5 good things. And most people are like, well, you got a movie made during COVID and like, you dropped 30 pounds and you did this. And I'm like, oh yeah, but I didn't take Italian and I didn't take my Spanish lessons and I didn't learn the piano, So yeah, I should be a little more easier on myself.
It was that thing that someone put out right at the beginning about how, Shakespeare wrote King Lear in just a few days.
Yeah.
That really set us all up for failure.
Yeah, they set the bar up for us and we're like, well, you got to write King Lear now. Well, now you got a whole year to write 10 King Lears. And you're just like, oh man, that's a big bar. That's a high bar.
And I wanted to talk about The Unbreakable Boy and the journey of bringing that to screen because you just finished production on it. And one of the things that always fascinates me whenever you're turning literature into a film is there's obviously so many more pages that you have in a book and so many more internal moments that we can explore with characters in a completely different way. And the challenge is always, how do you translate that to screen? So what was the journey of just figuring out what the challenges were going to be with this specific story, but also the places within the book that you really just felt naturally lent itself to bringing it into a new medium?
Yeah, this book was a tough one, The Unbreakable Boy, because it spans 20 years. So when I first read it, I thought, what a great story. And we toyed with maybe doing a TV series. And then we thought maybe it would be easier to do as a film. And then I partnered with Lionsgate and Kingdom. And at one point, early on, I thought, well, maybe I should just sit down and write it, because I had some ideas, but I couldn't crack the nut on how to take 20 years and pare it down into this story. And then Kingdom has a works with a writer director, John Gunn, and he had such a great take on it. And he went off and he wrote the script in literally like 2 months over the summer, and his first draft was so good that Lionsgate greenlit it like immediately, because it was and I've never had that happen so quickly before. And then John was able to direct it as well, and we got Zach Levi to play the lead, and we filmed it in November. So it all came together fairly quickly, quicker than other things I've done. But I think when you have a good story and you have a good writer, you have a good director, it all kind of comes together.
Right. And as well as being the person to discover that story and to option it and to produce it, you're also acting in the film as well. And I'm really interested in your relationship and the character work that you tend to do, whether it's something like Loosies, where you wrote the script and you were just thinking about it intrinsically from that moment, or even this project where even just when you're reading the book, you have the opportunity to start thinking about it in a different way, and how that really influences and impacts the way that you create your character and discover the different layers of them, as opposed to a project where you're taking a script that someone else has written and coming in closer to when it starts in production.
Well, this one was a little different than like Lucy's or like The Vanished for me, because those I wrote. This book, the character that I played actually wasn't really in the book that much. But the writer, John Gunn, I think he kind of wrote it specifically with me in mind. And when I read it, I was like, because there wasn't really a role for me to play, so I was just going to produce it. And then when the script came in, I was like, oh, this character is kind of interesting. It's a smaller role, but it's something I could do that's fun. And so, I think John kind of had it in his mind when he was writing it. I think because it kind of was in the world of something I could play, whereas before there was nothing in there for me to play. So when we were sitting down, he was like, hey, would you want to be in it? And I said, yeah, if there's a role in there for me. But for me, it was really about getting this story in the book on the big screen, whether I was in it or not. It wasn't really meant to be some vehicle for me as an actor. It was just it was a really great story, and I thought this story needs to be told, and it will be told. And then being able to partner with Lionsgate and Kingdom and have John come on board, it all kind of came together. And then John wrote this role, and I thought, oh well, now I get to have fun as an actor too, So with the other scripts, with Lucy's, I kind of lived with that character in my mind for a long time. And then with Hour of Lead, which became The Vanished, originally I was going to potentially play the lead in that, the father role that Thomas Jane played. And then the opportunity came for me to direct it. And I thought, well, I don't want to take on more than I can chew, because it's really difficult to direct and then jump in front of the camera. I mean, so again, there was a role in that I thought, oh, I could play this smaller role and have fun as an actor and still have the capacity to direct. And even with that smaller role in The Vanished that I wrote and directed, it was tough to, I'd have to come to set on the days I worked in costume, because I didn't have time to go to to a chair, a makeup chair, and I would just come in costume on the day, and I'd be wearing this cop uniform all day and directing, and then jumping in front of camera and having, the shot in my mind and making sure that I'm in frame, and then thinking about what the other actor's doing, because I'm still directing even though I'm in the scene with the person, and then also having to say my lines and direct. It's a whole nother skill set, and I found it kind of distracting, and I was like, man, I thought it would be fun, but it was like a pain in the neck every time I was like trying to jump in front of camera to say my lines. Not that I wouldn't want to grow to do more, but I have a whole newfound respect for like what Clint Eastwood does, where he kind of like directs and plays the lead, because it's so much multitasking, and you have to put so much trust in the DP and so much trust in other people. And then you don't really have the luxury and the time to run back and watch every take of yours. So you just have to trust that, okay, I feel like it's good. And I was watching the other actors, and you check to make sure that the framing was good. And, you only have a certain amount of time during the day to get your shots. So if you have to go back and sit there and watch, your takes over and over, you're just burning up daylight hours. So for the few scenes that I had in The Vanished, I mean, it was difficult enough. I can't imagine having to do that every single scene. It's a lot. And then having to memorize my lines and know my shot lists, and you're concerned about 10,000 things, and you got to set it aside when you're acting because you're focused on that character. So it's something I'd love to grow to maybe potentially play the lead one day and direct, but I'm also just happy sometimes doing one at a time,
And in writing the script for The Vanished, I know that was kind of almost like a psychologically cathartic experience for you, because the whole premise was that you were in an RV park and you heard these gunshots in the distance, and you were there with your daughter, and they were just like, oh, it's all fine, don't worry. But that kind of led you to thinking, like, what if something happened? What if someone escaped? What if there was a situation that could happen? And so given that it was kind of this cathartic experience and something that you described as just really needing to kind of like get out of your head in writing the script, how was that a different journey for you in writing as opposed to the other scripts, and the way that you tend to work on them or emotionally connect to them differently?
They all seem, whenever I'm writing a script, they all become I become possessed by the story. So like it is always cathartic to get that story out, because there's some writers, and I don't know how to do this, I wish I did, but they take note cards and they put all these note cards up and they kind of structure everything, and they have everything laid out, and they have this map and this blueprint, and then they go and they write it. And for me, I do all that work kind of in my head, where it's all about imagining this world and imagining these characters. And that is what takes the most time. Because when I write the scripts, usually they're very quick. Like I wrote Loosies in like 2.5 weeks, and I wrote The Vanished in 3 weeks. And people are like, wow, you write so fast. And I'm like, yeah, but I was thinking about it for about a year before I even put my fingers on the keyboard, because it gets to a point where I can't stop thinking about it, and then I have to pour it out. And then once it pours out, then it's all just kind of coming out of me. And then usually that first draft is pretty close to what I shoot. Like, I don't think there was a big difference in the first draft, and then minor tweaks with any of the scripts I've filmed, Loosies or The Vanished, or I also wrote a movie called they changed the name. It was sold to the Hallmark Channel. Accidentally in Love, it was called. They changed the name to that. But those scripts, like, I wrote quickly, and then there's minor tweaks as you get closer to filming. But again, it's all about the work you do before that. I think that's like with everything that I do, even as an actor. I meditate and I think about this character a lot, and then once you're shooting, you have to let it go and ride the wave, but the homework is always done before.
With The Vanished as well, what's so interesting about the tone that you managed to strike is you really managed to balance between it being a psychological thriller, there's kind of the whodunit element, and then at the same time, it is this intimate portrayal of these characters and the emotional experience that they're going through in the face of what they're up against. And is that something where you consciously are thinking about the different tones and kind of the different genres that you're pulling together as you're writing it, and how to balance those alongside of each other? Or because you'd been thinking about it for so long, did it really just naturally fit in and flow that way?
I think a little bit of both. I mean, I was always a fan of Hitchcock and Hitchcock thrillers and like mystery films that he's done, and I wanted to have a tone of that world, but that's more of a backdrop to what's happening with these characters. So in the foreground, this story to me is really about a relationship between a husband and a wife, and how they deal with a tragedy, and is that tragedy going to have them team up to strengthen their marriage, or is that tragedy going to have them blame each other and have that their marriage fall apart? And so that was the story I was telling, set behind this mystery of a girl gone missing, their daughter gone missing. And once you have that foreground story, and you understand what your characters are going through and what story you want to tell that way, you could set that story in space, in science fiction. You could set it, in a comedy. You could set it, in a thriller. I just happened to choose the, like a Hitchcock thriller to tell that story.
Yeah. And then, the way that it sounds like you direct your actors sounds really wonderful. Like I loved a way that you were describing how with Anne Heche, like you could just go up to her and kind of like make eye contact about something and grab her hand and she'd be like, yeah, I've got it. And then with Thomas Jane, it was a bit more of like intellectual conversation and him wanting to have a discussion about it. And it was just really interested in a little bit about how you kind of figure out whether it's that film or, when you directed Breaking and Exiting, just really figuring out and reading each of your actors and each of your cast and just figuring out exactly what it is that they need from you and really adapting your style for each of them individually.
Well, I think, I don't know if it's something you can learn. I think it's something that you feel. I personally, because I'm an actor, I love when directors understand me. And you understand how I work and understand what it is, because it's like speaking a language. You know what I mean? I can go up to you and speak a language that you don't understand, and I'm like, what's wrong with you? You're not understanding what I'm saying. Or I could say, well, what language are you speaking, and try to put it in the language that you're speaking. So I tend to try to get to know the actors, beforehand, and you get to know them just by conversations with them. One of the greatest experiences I had, or nicest experiences I had on with the director was during a movie I shot called The Big Kahuna, and the director took me out to lunch, and he just talked to me about stuff, about my life. And we got personal. He asked me personal questions, and I just thought it was a lovely lunch, And I was like, oh, that was really nice. He was very inquisitive about my life. And then we got to a point where I was doing a scene. This is about a month after this lunch. We were shooting, and we were doing this scene where I had to kind of break down emotionally. And in the middle of this scene, he starts talking to me about something that I had spoken to him at lunch about that was very personal to me. And it literally just got me to break down. And it was such a beautiful thing, because he understood like what it would take, or what, how he could help me get to a place. And he didn't, and he did it in a way that wasn't forced, or, it was just being there for me and personal, and being able to like understand me. And for me, I try to get to know the actors, and you could tell right away sometimes, like, oh, well, he thinks this way. Thomas is more intellectual, and Anne's more about feeling, just by having conversations with them. And then when you get on set, right away when you're talking to them if they understand something or not. And sometimes, even if you don't have the luxury of that, you could still figure out how to help somebody. Like we had one actor who was kind of new, and so one of the scenes is he comes out and he has to, I said, okay, so in this scene you just knocked out Anne Heche, and she's in the back room, and you're frantic, and you're trying to figure out like what to do with the body. So you think to yourself, okay, I'll tie her up, and I'll put her in the back of my truck, and I'll bury her in the backyard or whatever. But you're frantic and you're trying to figure it out, and you have to burn the evidence. So I want you to come into the office, and you're thinking, and you're frantic, and I have to see those beats, and you got to think, okay, and you grab the lighter fluid and the tape and the garbage bags, and then you just run back into the other room. And so he came out, and he went straight to the lighter fluid, garbage bags, and went right back into the other room. And I was like, okay, all right. So, and then you try a technique, or try to help them, and you say, okay, so have you ever been in your life really frantic? Like, think of a secret that you have that you don't want anybody to know, and you try that, And he's like, got it. And he comes out and he grabs the lighter fluid, the garbage bags, and the tape, and he runs back in, and I'm missing the franticness, and I'm missing the, him searching, And so I sat there and I was like, okay, what can I do to get him to give me what I need, So I said, okay, listen, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to hide this stuff. I'm going to hide the tape. I'm going to hide the garbage bag. I'm going to hide the lighter fluid. You come out. You got 30 seconds to find it. Okay. Okay. He comes out. Now he's frantically, and he knows he's under time. He's frantically trying to figure this stuff out. And the whole crew is going colder, colder, hotter, hotter. And he's getting closer to, now he actually has to search for this stuff too. And I got it in one take, and it was exactly what I needed. but you have to kind of figure out like, okay, how can I help this person to give me the emotions that I need? And if it's not something that is, I tried like a personal technique that wasn't working for him. So then if that doesn't work, you have to resort to something else.
Mhm. And when you're acting in projects where you're involved from the offset in a different way, thinking about the Unbreakable Boy, where you're producing it, and so you're part of the casting process, and you're really seeing not just kind of the skill sets that someone brings, but also personality wise, how they like to approach their craft and how they're going to come into it. When you're then off working on your own character, how does that help you? And what's the gift that gives you in terms of just that time that usually would just be you before you're in conversation with everybody and in rehearsal, just having even more of a sense of what these other characters and relationships are potentially going to end up looking like on screen?
Mhm. Well, I think I've learned a long time ago that because as an actor, you just want to go in there, you want to nail it, the scene in one take, and have everybody clap and hand you an Academy Award and feel really good walking out and be like, nailed that one, didn't even have to get a take two. But it's really honestly not about pleasing other people. When you behind the scenes on the other side of the camera and you're producing and you're writing and you're directing, we're not I'm never sitting there going, oh, that actor sucks right now, or oh wow, he did a great scene. I'm like, am I getting the pieces I need to tell the story? And so even if he's giving me a moment here and a moment there that I can use, I'm happy. So if I get take one, take two, take three, they're all slightly a little different, and I get beautiful pieces, I can build in the editing room something really wonderful. If I get three takes in a row that are exactly the same, then why waste film on take two and take three? So the takes then become, when that, more of an exploration of the scene and of the character, and how what can I do a little differently in this take, and how can I express myself a little more in this take, and how can I really be more truthful in this take, and just play in that space, and less about like I have to get every line right or I have to impress somebody. um I remember working with Danny DeVito once, and it was early in my career, and he would say a line, and then he'd go, you know what, I'm just going to take that line back. And he'd say it again a different way. And he'd go, you know what, let me take it back one more time. And it was a little choppy because you're in the middle of the scene going, there's no, but he just gave the director 4 good takes of these few lines that he was playing with. And he knew that it was a close up, so they have to cut into it. So it's his space, it's his time. If it's a medium or wider shot that you're trying to get a oneer, you can't really do that. But if it's your time and your space of the close up, you can take your time with it, and just put less pressure on yourself and just explore, and then allow the director to have options and choices.
Mhm. And obviously, we went through that whole period where the entire industry was just completely shut down, and performing just wasn't something that a lot of people were able to do for a long time. And when you first walked back onto set that very first day, I just was interested in what that felt like and what the emotional experience was getting to step back onto a set again after such a period of uncertainty of like if and when we would be able to do that.
Well, it's funny because I had this experience of like, oh wow, this is like, I can't. The analogy is like getting back up on the horse, right? So if you've been a rider and you're like, wow, this is great, I'm back up on the horse, and it's such a beautiful animal. But at the same time, that you haven't been on that horse for like a year, and you're like, whoa, I might fall off here. It's a little unshaky, and like, and as much as I've been acting for 25 years, it really is. The more you do it, the easier it gets. When you're doing a TV series, and you're doing 8 to 10 pages a day, it's like going to the gym every day, and it's flowing. And all of a sudden, if you take 6 months off or a year off and somebody gives you 5 pages to do, you're like, it's wonky because you haven't been to the gym and, the actor gym in a while. So the first day of set was like, oh, this is beautiful. And then, but also like, wow, I haven't been on this horse for a minute and I have to figure this out again. But it's like riding a bicycle. It comes back quickly, but it is a little weird when you haven't been doing something consistently.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to see the film when it finally comes out. And thank you so much for such a
Thanks.
lovely
I'm
conversation.
excited about The Unbreakable Boy. It's a beautiful story. It's a true story. Scott Lorette wrote it about his family and his son Austin, who's a great, great guy. And Austin has he's on the spectrum, and it's just about a father's son relationship, a family having to deal with someone that's on the spectrum, and what he thought was how can I fix my son? How can I make him fit in to this world? And what he realized was his son is perfect just the way he is, and his son had so much more to teach him about being human and what it is to love and what it is to, you know, just spread love and it's such a beautiful book that I'm just really excited for everyone to see it. It's one of those movies that you walk away with wanting to be a better person, wanting to love more, wanting to, puts a smile on your face and makes you realize how beautiful life is. And when I read it, I thought this has to be told because I feel like the world needs movies like this. Needs a movie that helps heal and helps, spread that message of love. So I was really excited to be able to get it off the ground.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It sounds like the perfect type of movie that we need, especially in these days. Thank you so much, Peter.
Thank you for having me.